Eladi tiptoed quietly to Pajomo and removed his cap. He fell to the ground immediately at what he saw, for Pajomo had a small horn in the center of his head. Pajomo laughed wickedly. As Eladi ran through the back door, he saw Pajomo's farm for the first time, filled with the spirits of young men working for him. Before I continue, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.
Once upon a time, in Sakonde, a small but busy town, lived a teenage boy, Eladi. At 17, he was a troubled soul, angry, restless, and always in one trouble or the other, stealing and fighting at will. His father, Ilako, walked away mysteriously when Eladi was only 3 years old, and nobody ever heard from him again. Eladi's mother, Shadimi, was a middle-aged woman who had Eladi after waiting 18 years in marriage. She had lost all hopes of ever having a child when the gods suddenly smiled on her and gave her a son, Eladi. As such, Shadimi over-pampered and spoilt Eladi. She never cautioned or disciplined him and fought seriously with anyone who attempted to do so. One day, Shadimi received a message from her village that her aged father was sick and she should return home immediately. Shadimi became tense at the news. I thought I would never have any reason to return to Laro, she said, trembling, as the village only reminded her of sorrow and strange happenings. But it was her father calling, the great Shubaza. She couldn't ignore. She went outside and sat down, waiting patiently for Eladi, as was his usual habit of roaming the town from morning till night, causing trouble and stealing. He arrived by 1 a.m. in the midnight with a large swelling on his forehead. "What happened to you?" "I got into a small fight with Imahe and he hit me with a stick," Eladi responded. "Come with me," she ordered. "I can't allow Mama Idachome see you like this." Eladi was surprised and scared at the same time. He had never seen his mother in such a mood, and she was talking in such confusing tone that he didn't understand. "Who is Mama Idachone?" he asked with his voice trembling. "She is your father's mother," Shadimi answered without looking at him. She took him to her room, bent down, and pulled out a small round earthen pot. Shadimi smashed the pot on the floor and took out a piece containing a black jelly-like substance and rubbed the substance on Eladi's swollen head. He felt a cold sensation and the swelling on his forehead disappeared immediately. "Pack your bags. We leave for Laro village first thing at cockcrow tomorrow morning," Shadimi said, without looking at her son, and walked away. By this time, Eladi's confusion had doubled. He never knew that his mother was a healer. Neither was he aware of any of his father's relatives. These thoughts troubled him as he kept on tossing and turning on the bed and touching his forehead to be sure if what happened was real. He finally fell asleep by the early hours of the morning. Not quite long after he fell asleep, Shadimi came and woke him up. He got up, looking at his mother, surprised from last night. His mother asked why he was staring at her, and he held her hands and pleaded with her to explain what happened the previous night. But his mother laughed and denied everything. She told him it was all a nightmare. "Please get up, my son. We are traveling to Laro village this morning to see my sick father." Eladi opened his mouth in shock. He kept on touching the point on his head that was swollen, but there was no sign of pain or swelling anymore. Not sure of what awaited him in Laro, Iladi got ready and set out on the trip. They arrived Laro by noon. It was a calm, peaceful and beautiful village. The villagers greeted them with so much respect and honor, and Iladi was surprised. He never knew he was from such a respectable family. She dropped her bags and held his hand, dragging him into her father's house quickly. "Wait here," she said, as she entered into a room to see her father. After about an hour inside, she came out and took Iladi inside to see his grandfather. "He has the right spirit, but he is poorly raised. A mistake we are all about to suffer," Shadimi's father said. "We won't. I will see to that," Shadimi answered. "There is nothing you can do about it," her father said, patting her gently on the back. "The mistake has already been made." The next morning, Iladi woke up feeling lost in the recent event that had happened in the last 24 hours. He decided to take a walk around the village to clear his head. He got to a T-junction and saw a group of young guys about his age smoking tobacco and drinking locally brewed gin, ogogoro as they usually call it. He walked up to them and introduced himself. They quickly welcomed him into their midst and offered him some ogogoro and tobacco. As they continued to chat aimlessly, these boys were miscreants in the village, going about causing trouble around the village daily. In the next few days, Iladi resumed with these boys early in the morning and stayed with them till midnight, drinking and causing trouble around the village. 3 days later, while sitting with the miscreants, an old man passed by. He stood and gave Iladi a serious stare. As soon as their eyes both locked, Iladi felt a sharp electric sensation travel through his body. And then the old man quickly walked away, and smartly too for someone his age. Iladi couldn't shake off the fact that there was something familiar about the old man. He felt like he had known him all his life. Iladi turned to the guys and asked who the man was. But by the time the boys turned, the old man was nowhere to be found. They all laughed at Iladi, telling him he had drank too much alcohol and was beginning to see spirits. But luckily for him, the old man walked by again, still staring at Iladi the next day. "That's him!" he screamed. "That's the man I saw yesterday." "That's Pajogo," one of the boys answered casually. Pajogo was dressed in a very expensive attire with a unique kind of embroidery used only by royalty. "Tell me more about him," Iladi queried. The boys were surprised at his request, but Iladi insisted, and one of the boys answered and said, "He's the richest man in Laro village. He has trucks of yams and other farm produce delivered to him every morning, but no one has ever seen the trucks arrive or the drivers of the truck. They just see trucks filled with the farm produce and massive yams packed in front of his house." "You forgot the most important part," one of the boys interrupted. "Please tell me," Ladi pleaded desperately. "Well, no one has ever seen Pajomo's head, as he has never opened his cap, except for a few young men who approached Pajomo and had a pact with him. Pajomo opened his cap for them and showed them the center of his head. The young men went home and woke up with sacks of money by their bedsides the next day and became extremely wealthy. They were seen spending money recklessly around the village, and then all of a sudden, they all relocated from Laro village to the city and never returned, the boy concluded. Iladi stood up sharply. We must visit Pajomo tonight and wake up wealthy tomorrow morning. If it were that easy, do you think we will still be here? Another of the boys answered him. They told him how Pajomo never allows anyone close to himself, no matter the circumstances. For some reason, there's a strange force that repels people away from him. Then we plan an attack, Iladi answered with certainty. We must reveal his cap and get rich. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity and I am not ready to miss it. The other guys were quiet for a while, but Ladi was able to convince them. They planned their attack for the next day and decided to carry it out late at night. The D-Day finally came and they waited till midnight to launch their attack. The boys broke into Pajomo's house quietly and moved into his room. They found him sleeping peacefully. The other boys stood behind, afraid and unsure of the next step. Iladi moved forward boldly to Pajomo, bent down and gently removed the cap on his head. They all froze in shock at what they saw on Pajomo's head, for there was a large horn in the center. Pajomo opened his eyes and gave a sinister laughter. Without uttering a word, the boys began to shiver from fear and they ran out of his house immediately until they arrived at their houses. Iladi woke up with a pounding headache and could barely raise his head. He looked around the room to see if the bags of money had appeared, but there was none. Disappointed, he managed to dress up and left the house hurriedly. He went to the T-junction, but none of the other guys was there. Iladi went back home confused and disappointed. But in the next few days, he began to see the other guys spend money lavishly around the village. He tried to approach them so as to get his own share of the money, but they all acted strangely, like they had never seen him in their life before. And after a few days, they all disappeared from the village. Iladi felt betrayed and decided to launch another attack on Pajomo. But this time around, he decided he will go all by himself and decided to act fast too. That night, he went to Pajomo's house again and let himself inside. But this time around, it was much easier than the first time. And Iladi didn't suspect any foul play. He went straight into Pajomo's room, tiptoed to his bed, and removed Pajomo's cap. But this time around, the horn in the center of Pajomo's head came alive. It sent electric current throughout Iladi's body, and he fell to the ground lifeless. Pajomo got down from the bed and placed his hand on Iladi in an attempt to cast a spell on Iladi. But he noticed that as soon as he touched Iladi's chest, a glowing fire came out of his chest, and Pajomo instantly felt drained. He was confused and shocked and quickly removed his hands. I must take this boy away from this place quickly. He smells trouble. Pajomo immediately carried Iladi and took him out of the house. He walked to Iladi's grandfather's house and dropped him right in front of the house, turned back and walked away weakly, as with each passing moment, Pajomo kept on getting weaker and weaker and weaker.
Pajomo arrived at his hut, laid on the bed, and slept. The next morning, he woke up and went to check in front of his house as usual for his supply of yams and other farm produce. But to his surprise, Pajomo only saw 3 tubers of yams on the floor. There was no trailer, none whatsoever. No, I must get to the root of this, Pajomo shouted. Who is this boy? He has drained my powers, and my source of wealth is fast disappearing before my very eyes. Quickly, Pajomo dressed up and went to Eladi's grandfather's house. Meanwhile, Shadimi came out when she heard people shouting in front of her house. There was a large crowd gathered. She rushed down there to see what was happening. She managed to force her way through the crowd. Behold, it was Eladi, her son, lying lifeless on the floor. She pleaded with the people and they helped her carry Eladi into his grandfather's house and placed him on the bed. Shortly after, Shadimi heard a knock on the door. Immediately, Shadimi opened the door. She saw Pajomo standing. She immediately shouted, Ilako, so I see you again. Immediately, Pajomo raised his head up and saw Shadimi. He screamed and fell to the ground. Pajomo is Ilako, Eladi's father, who ran away when Eladi was just 3 years old. Pajomo was filled with tears and was crying bitterly. So Eladi is my son. No wonder my charms didn't have any effect on him. What do I do now? Watch out for part 2. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. And as for the young men, they never really went to the city. As soon as they spent the money lavishly for 3 days, their spirits resumed at Pajomo's farm and worked day and night. But now, everything is about to take a drastic turn.